Okay, today, Nick, we're going to talk about a movie about dreams and layers of getting into dreams. We're going to talk Inception, right?
Or we're going to talk about Nightmare on Elm Street, right?
I think one of these two.
One of these two.
What else is there?
Yeah. What other movies talk about dream hacking? Well, we're going to talk about one of the first movies that came out. So, if you didn't look down below what the title of the episode is, and I said we're going to talk about a horror movie that people jump into people's dreams, and it came out in 1984, you'll assume Nightmare on Elm Street, but this movie...
Especially because one of the villains has claws at one point.
I'll bring that up after we're done with the intro. I have a funny... relate to the funny story to that.
Definitely. Yes, so we're going to talk Dreamscape today, the Dennis Quaid starring vehicle that features... I mean, how often do you get Max von Sydow and Christopher Plummer as your two backups in there? So definitely going to break down this film. It came out in a very interesting time period, so close to Nightmare, so close to Brain Scan, another film that kind of dealt with dream stuff, and how that all played out for it. As always, I'm one of your hosts, Kyle Goethe from GoatFilmReviews.com.
And I'm Nick from the St. Paul Filmcast, and today we're going to talk about Dreamscape.
Stay with us. Welcome back to the show. Kyle and Nick on Film. Today we're talking Dreamscape from director Joseph Rubin.
This also stars Kate Capshaw, and this is the third movie she did in 1984. She did Temple of Doom with Indiana Jones. There was another small independent film that came out after this one in the fall called Windy City. It's a very melodramatic movie. Actually, you can find it probably on YouTube. It's a public domain right now.
Strangely enough, Kate Capshaw is in two films in 1984 that feature hearts getting taken out of people's bodies. So really, we're talking a lot of 84 was a weird year because there was a lot of people that seemed to be copying each other.
And the other thing I would bring up for Kate Capshaw is because after 1984, it's like she married Spielberg after they met on set, and then she never did movies anymore. That's a large misnomer. She's continued to do movies. She just was able to be very picky about her projects afterwards.
Yeah, that's one of the blessings of it. And I think what's interesting about her, I like her way more in Dreamscape because I really don't like the character as she's written and portrayed in Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. It's just she's not a very compelling character. She's the probably worst indie girl of the four films.
Right, it's a little slightly almost annoying.
Yeah.
This is also features the complex of not just a horror movie, but a political thriller as well, which is a pretty dominant thing of the 80s. If anything encapsulate the 80s of both blending genres, which we did a lot of times in the 80s of blending genres. This is another one that should be a footnote.
Yeah, it definitely feels like an action sci-fi fantasy, and then it has those elements of horror to it. I mean, and that's really kind of unique in how it's done. Is that we introduced this film as kind of the horror film. We're kind of getting towards the Halloween time of year, but the horror itself is more kind of that 80s horror that's not really part of a horror movie. You know, like in the 80s, you could have horrific scenes in a very family-friendly movie, or in this case, in an action sci-fi kind of a film. So, for those of you who have not seen it, of course, Dennis Quaid, very young, plays Alex Gardner, a 20-something-year-old psychic. Yeah, who has basically been on the run because people want to use his power for good and bad. He gets taken in by Dr. Paul Novotny, played by Max von Sydow, the wonderful Max von Sydow.
Yeah, he yells every scene he's in. Yeah. Not there very much, but he's...
And they're basically kind of turn him into a doctor of dreams, if you will. Like, he can kind of go in and into people's dreams, analyze what's wrong with them, and help them kind of to correct their lives. And that's kind of what a lot of the film does. It gets a little repetitive in that he's diving in trying to help these people out. All the while, this sinister government kind of organization wants to use the power to basically assassinate the president.
They want to use it as a weapon and during the Cold War era. And of course, like anything in the 80s and usually in the 70s, anything that is a technical advance will want to be converted to win the Cold War. Christopher Plummer plays phenomenal. He plays this very reserved, slimy.
And it's funny because he doesn't really go over the top in the film at all, and neither does Sydow. When you get these two guys that are just powerhouses of the medium, and I think Dennis Quaid, this is very early in his career, so him being a leading man, you kind of need to pack the film with.
And I think this is the right cast
chops.
I think because he plays this very overly confident, sneaky. You want to punch him in the face almost sometimes.
Yeah, I did say that at one point. He's got a very punchable face in this movie.
But he can back it up because he's very talented.
Yeah, but then you have these two guys supporting him. You have Capshaw, who she wasn't really a major name at this point, but she did have enough of that clout going along with it. And then, you know, just even to like character actors like David Patrick Kelly, who I'm a huge fan of. I love David Patrick Kelly from Twin Peaks, from The Crow. What was the other, you know,
he plays a very sympathetic villain.
You know, he did. Yeah,
you almost have a little bit of sympathy. You understand there's something wrong there, but
and as the layers peel back and you kind of discover who he is, it doesn't, you know, like when we talked about Joker last year, his choices don't make him a good person, but you understand why he made them.
That's exactly.
And I think
that's a good analogy. I like that. Yeah,
he's definitely a sympathetic villain that again should have made better choices. Who else is there? We get George Wendt, who I think is wonderfully placed in this film.
Which is funny because Cheers actually started in 1984, so this is right just a couple months before the TV show started. Mm-hmm. And, you know, George Wendt was a great supporting character throughout, peppered around films in the 80s and stuff. And yeah, it's a subplot of a political thriller. There's a little bit of like Tom Clancy stuff going on.
But it's never hard to dig into. I guess when you get these kinds of political thrillers or these espionage or these, you know, kind of intense government-based films, sometimes it can be a little bit difficult to dig into, and I think that's where kind of the dreamscape elements and the dream linking actually helps to liven things up a little bit.
So let's talk about, they actually go into people's dreams. And I think the setup, you know, they're very limited by the access of technology, but they did it very convincing well because when you watch the dream sequences, they're very unforgettable. I love the art direction for it. It gives a very powerful punch to it.
I would say the only problem with it being that it, you know, of course, with time, certain films just don't age as well. And I think there's certain elements of the special effects that are used that don't age as well in the film. But when you look at its $6 million budget and that it wasn't made by a major studio either, this was an incredibly ambitious project to hit at. And I think if you kind of go into it understanding the time that has lapsed, I think it is effective and they are memorable sequences. You're absolutely right about that.
Yeah. So the dream sequence I pay off. The story I can relate to is actually when I was in grade school. I was in second grade when this movie came out, and in '84, the playground we were talking about. Everybody's talking about Nightmare on Elm Street. You got to see this movie, Nightmare on Elm Street, because it came out in the fall when we were in school. And I was like, "Are you sure that's what it's called? I'm pretty sure you're describing Dreamscape." And I got in huge arguments like Dreamscape. This guy, you know, actually has his nail hands and he rips out people, and he's like, "No, that's Freddy Krueger. No, that's Dreamscape." So David Patrick Kelly is the original Freddy Krueger.
Yeah, I guess so. I guess he had a little bit of a jump on him. What's so interesting about it is this film just barely came out with enough time to be a box office success, because they do think after Nightmare exploded, if this film would come out after that, it would have been very problematic to recoup its budget. And the interesting thing too is that, you know, the script is co-written by Chuck Russell, who went on to direct the third Nightmare on Elm Street film, and he co-wrote that with Frank Darabont. So
I'm glad you caught that.
I like that he, you know, and if you look at Dream Warriors, which is the third Nightmare film, it definitely has elements of utilizing your dreams to make yourself better. It very much feels like a Dreamscape quasi sequel, as if, you know, a cinematic universe has brought these things together. It's also the second film to receive a PG-13 ever after Red Dawn.
This is the I can't remember but a PG. This will definitely be an R now.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. And when you see like the bloody heart sequence, I was like, this is a PG-13 movie, but I guess they were kind of trying to figure out the rating still. And we didn't have that big push for like no blood makes it an R-rated movie kind of a thing. But you know, going beyond the cast, behind the camera, I think Joseph Rubin does a solid job directing the film. He's, of course, you know, I think he went on to make one of my favorite childhood horror movies, which was The Good Son.
This is actually pretty good.
Yeah, and
very dialed lo-fi. Yeah.
And I think he's capable of kind of managing tones really well. For me, the biggest fault in the movie, the biggest thing that really took me out of it, I really couldn't stand the score.
Musically?
It's very...
You
It's very hitting and loud and boisterous. And I think it doesn't feel like it was mixed in with the dialogue very well.
I think if you had something very mellow, because throughout the whole movie you have this high tension, but I think if you have a low-level music that kind of builds up the tension, you're right. It looked like the music wanted to have a punch to it that didn't really need to be there. The other point, there's a subplot of the marriage counseling that, God, you could cut it.
And I think that's, for me, like something where like the tone of that sequence didn't feel like it fit the rest of the movie. Yeah. It's a very comedic, and that's where, again, like the score comes in and it's really, you know, it's very like bombastic and silly. It kind of felt like a Danny Elfman moment in a movie that's more serious. I didn't mind that they did this sequence, but like the whole thing where he's looking trying to figure out why the man is like afraid of losing his wife, and everyone's in bed with her, and they're all under the bed, and they're climbing out. It felt like a clown car scene, you know.
I think you could cut it.
Yeah,
I don't. You
think
won't lose anything
much
of the story, and I think you enhance the tension of it.
Yeah, or find a better
template,
like sequence, because really you could change that out with any character who's suffering with the dream issue, or just, I guess, showcase it better.
Yeah,
and you wouldn't have to deal with it. But the Blanky comedic music placed over the not so funny scene, just kind of just didn't really work. You know.
Yeah, but I do like the part of him going into Cape Cacha's dreams unauthorized, and it gives a sense of, well,
I like the sense of it that could never be in a movie today.
no, but they captured an escalation that he doesn't need a machine to do this anymore.
Yeah. The only issue with that scene for me was that I just, the whole time he was doing it, I'm like, this is really wrong. Like, this is, and I wish that he hadn't gone as far as he did.
No,
maybe he had a moment of humanity.
Right. Okay. I want to clarify that. I think it's the right point to put in the story that you can hack somebody else's dreams. I think the execution of what happened in the dream needs to be changed.
Good clarification.
But I think the component that he can able to enhance his talents after being introduced to what he can do.
Yeah. It's again one of those scenes, kind of like the marriage counseling scene, where it's like the scene itself progresses the plot in an interesting way, but it's just the way it's done that definitely does not age well. It does not showcase well. And I just wish, like, he's our lead, so I don't want to not believe that he's a good person, or I want to believe that he's becoming a better person. When he does what he does in that sequence, I feel like there's no remorse for it. He doesn't really feel bad about it.
No, and that's where you take away from him being a complete hero about it.
Yeah, and it's one of those flaws that today would just be so hit on hard.
You definitely change that.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
But I think the film it's well put together. I think it's pretty nicely paced. It moves by at a pretty good clip, other than those few little moments where they could kind of tighten things up.
This is one of those, I actually think the art direction, the setup of the buildings and everything is way better than actually the cinematography. I think the gaffing, I think the makeup is, but I don't think cinematography actually moves forward the movie. I think it's just a vessel. Where I think the gaffing and art direction is phenomenal. Yeah, I think particularly the cinematography wins when it's in dream mode. Like when we're under the dream moment, that moment with the steel girder. Again, the special effects haven't aged perfectly, but I felt the tension in the scene. I liked that there's just some things that aren't quite right when you're in the dream. Like when he's on the steel girder and he's trying to hold on, he's trying to help this guy out. You know, the sky is swirling and there's these blacks and very the old-fashioned like 80s matte.
Yeah,
I love that.
It reminded me kind of like, you know, like the Ghostbusters sequence when everything's, you know, all the stormy clouds kind of come up and such.
Where you take two films and you put them together. And, one of the other things that doesn't work well is the whole political assassination attempt where you have the marching band coming out of the building. It looks so staged.
Yeah,
it doesn't look genuine. It's almost ridiculous to the point. But I think that's an attempt for the movie to try to balance between horror and hokiness, where I think if they stick more to the horror, I think it would enhance the...
Yeah, the comedy kind of does fall flat.
Yes.
And that would be maybe the only place I could see the editing should be cutting, is there's a lot of moments where someone gives a one-liner that just doesn't have an impact.
Yep.
And I can't imagine it had an impact then more than it does now. You know, sequences where, like, right at the beginning of the film, when these two guys are taking... Alex into the university, and he goes, "My mother put you up to this to get me to finish college, right?" Yeah. Like that was like a 5-second line, but I was like, just pull it out. It doesn't need to be there.
Yeah, I agree. And definitely they had one good day at the racetrack.
Yeah, exactly.
You could tell. Yeah.
I would have liked to have seen that subplot come back into play at the end. Actually, I thought that would have been fun. But overall, Dreamscape is I would say it's a good movie, but it's got a lot of flaws to it. It definitely is a film that's ambition is maybe bigger than the capabilities able to be done to it. It's ironic that it couldn't be remade today because it would be compared to
like Inception
and Nightmare. Because we kind of likened this when It 2017 came out. People said, "Oh, it's ripping off Stranger Things," not understanding that Stranger Things is based partly on It.
Yeah.
So I think this is one of those films where it's not popular enough where the remake could, build on that.
Yeah.
But I think it could be interesting to watch a horror action film that has a big budget, because you'll never get that with the Nightmare films. So for me overall, it's a slight recommendation. I think there's some definite flaws to the film, but it's interesting to watch. And for all of its flaws, you get some great performances from Quaid, from Sydal, from Plummer, from even Capshaw, and of course you get those great character actors as well. Yeah. I really enjoyed seeing this epic cast.
Yeah, and I think that's a huge payoff. And the other payoff is you can actually sound like you know what you're doing at parties when you say you saw this movie that really nobody knows about.
Exactly. Deep dive.
Deep dives, yeah. So yeah, this is kind of like the reason why I hold on to this movie is because of this nostalgia. It actually came out night before Freddy Krueger was in the public mainstream. And then from Freddy Krueger, this kind of went down to level, and they kind of knew about it. I think they were aware of it. That's why it came out in August, where you had to hit that arrow where we're not going to be in the fall to compete, but we're not a summer blockbuster movie. Where can we do? Where can we go? August? Okay.
That's kind of the problem when two companies realize that they have the similar product. Is it comes down to a race to get it out, and maybe this film was a little rushed to get it out.
I wouldn't be surprised when they made it. Yeah.
I remember that happening with the All the Money in the World, which of course had Christopher Plummer taking over the role of Kevin Spacey's character J. Paul Getty. They had to rush that film to get out to make sure that the miniseries that was going to air on FX that had the same story, they had to get it out 2 months early so that it could still make its money. So I definitely can see how that would be possible. But now, Nick, of course, you watched this film much younger age. You just watched it again for rewatch. Do you feel like this is still a recommended Nick pick? Or?
Oh, yeah. I think you get a lot more out of it. It's a wonderful ensemble cast for a horror movie. You get a huge payoff from that. And you learn a little bit about how you want to do the writings. How do you want to start the beginning? I definitely won't want to put him at a racetrack anymore. He would be doing something else where he can win money with being psychic.
Yeah, definitely. E-gaming or something.
E-gaming or he's on his phone.
But definitely, thanks for picking this one. This is one I only watched the first 15 minutes of like 10 years ago and fell asleep watching, so I got to actually finish the movie. So it was like 3 a.m. Forgive me, okay? A lot of stuff going on. I was in college. It was things
such a
happening.
cliche. You fell asleep to a movie that was talking about falling asleep.
We didn't even get to the part about the dreams at that point in the movie. But overall, thank you guys for joining us for this episode. It was really fun to visit on this one. Have you seen Dreamscape? Let us know. I'd like to hear your comments in the below here as well. It's a wonderful, introductory horror film. Because it's not really a horror film, but there's horror to it. So give us a like if you guys enjoyed this content, and let us know your thoughts on the film below as well. And hey, don't forget to click that subscribe. We got new episodes every single week of Kyle and Nick on Film that you can be a part of. Do you know how you can be a bigger part, Nick?
Patreon!
Join the Patreon. Go
become a member. Help us out.
Yeah, it's www.patreon.com/KyleNickOnFilm. We've got tiers as low as $1 a month, and in that too, you get to kind of take part in some of the conversation that we have. We even ask you guys to help us pick some of the movies we talk about. They're 52 weeks in a year. We got to come up with 52 movies every year. What are we going to do? So consider joining that. And if you can't, hey, share the video. Let people know about it and get that conversation going with other people too. So that's it for us, guys. Nick, where can we find you?
You can find St. Paul Filmcast on iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play. Where can you find your film reviews?
GoatFilmReviews.com. Check it out. We got stuff written down there. So thank you guys for joining us so much. Try to stay awake at the movies. Try to enjoy yourself. And if you see someone that looks like Dennis Quaid in your dreams, lucky you.
Lucky.